The courthouse smelled of old paper and polished wood, that faint mix of time and secrets. I had walked through those doors countless times before, but that morning, my legs trembled like I was stepping into someone else's life. Maybe I was. The marble floor reflected the morning light pouring through the tall windows, scattering patterns across my black heels. I clutched my handbag tightly. Inside it, a folded photograph that had kept me awake for nights. When I reached the courtroom door, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't the case that terrified me, it was who would be sitting on that bench, behind the mahogany desk. Judge Samuel Harlow. The man who once promised me forever. The man who didn't know he had a son. I hadn't seen Samuel in 24 years. He didn't know what happened after that night, the night everything changed. I sat in the second row, quiet and invisible, my eyes fixed on him as he entered the courtroom in his black robe. His silver hair gleamed under the ceiling lights, and the gavel in his hand struck the desk like thunder, confident, commanding, detached. Until his gaze found mine. He froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. His eyes widened, the rhythm of his breath faltered, and his hand tightened on the gavel. He recognized me. I looked down quickly, pretending to adjust my scarf, but inside my chest, my heart slammed against my ribs. Every nerve screamed to run. But I couldn't. Not this time. Because today, our son, was the one standing trial. It had been 3 days since the arrest. Ethan had been taken in for a crime he swore he didn't commit: arson. The police claimed he had set fire to the construction site of a property owned by a politician. They said there was CCTV footage showing someone wearing his jacket. They said his fingerprints were on a lighter found at the scene. But I knew my boy. Ethan couldn't even kill a spider without apologizing to it. He sat there now, behind the defense table, eyes dull, wrists cuffed. The orange prison uniform looked wrong on him, like a cruel costume. He glanced back at me once, his expression a mixture of shame and exhaustion. I nodded faintly, the silent message we had shared since he was little. I'm here. I believe you. Case 4721, the clerk called. State versus Ethan Carter. The sound of his name echoed through the hall like a verdict already written. Judge Harlow's voice broke the silence. Let's proceed. His tone was professional, but I could feel the tension beneath it, like a taut wire ready to snap. I wondered if he'd say something, if he'd call my name, if he'd remember the summer we met, the promises, the child we created, the heartbreak that followed. But he didn't. He looked right through me, as if I were just another face in the crowd. That night, after the hearing adjourned, I sat by Ethan's bedside in the holding cell. His lawyer, a young woman named Melissa, had left us alone for a few minutes. Mom, Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse. I swear I didn't do it. I wasn't there. I know, I said softly. Tell me everything again. I was home. Watching that stupid movie you hate. I didn't even leave the house. I don't know how my fingerprints got there. Someone's setting me up. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He looked so much like Samuel when he was young, the same deep-set eyes, the same sharp jawline. It was a resemblance I had prayed no one would notice. But now, the man who once loved me more than his own life was the one deciding my son's fate. I didn't believe in coincidence anymore. After leaving the station, I walked aimlessly through the rain, my coat soaked, my mind spinning. Memories surfaced like ghosts: the day Samuel and I met at the university debate club, his laughter, the letters we exchanged when he moved to another city for law school. He had dreams, ambition, and a smile that made me believe in happy endings. But when I told him I was pregnant, everything shattered. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared at me, stunned, scared, silent. His career was about to begin, and I was a problem he couldn't afford. So I left before he could ask me to. For years, I told Ethan his father had died before he was born. It was easier than saying, he chose ambition over us. Now, sitting on that courtroom bench years later, I wondered if karma had its own twisted sense of justice. The next day, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. No envelope. No name. Just 6 words written in neat cursive: meet me tonight. Don't tell him. No address, only a time. 9:30 p.m. I knew who it was before I even read it twice. At exactly 9:30, I arrived at the old Riverside Cafe, the one that had closed years ago but still had a few flickering lights. The door was unlocked. Samuel was already there, sitting by the window. He looked older, wearier, but his eyes, those same grey eyes that once made me lose myself, hadn't changed. "Hello, Anna," he said quietly. "I didn't. Sit. You shouldn't have contacted me. I had to." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please." I hesitated, then sat down. "You have a son," he said softly, like the words were painful. "I did," I replied sharply. 24 years ago." He flinched, his jaw tightening. "Why didn't you tell me?" I laughed bitterly. "You really want to go down that road? You think you would have given up your career for me? For a child you didn't plan? I would have. Don't lie to me, Samuel. You chose your path. I chose mine." He exhaled, looking down. "I didn't know, Anna. I swear to you, if I had, then what?" I snapped. "You'd be a good father. A husband. Do you even know how to be either of those things?" Silence. The rain hit the window harder, and for a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the city outside. Finally, he spoke again. His innocent. I frowned. "What?" "Your son. Ethan. He didn't set that fire." I stared at him, my pulse quickening. "Then why?" "Because someone wants him to take the fall," he interrupted. "And I can't stop it. Not officially." "Why not?" "Because the man behind this owns half the people in that courtroom." He leaned forward. "But I can help you, off the record." My stomach twisted. "Help me? After all these years, now you want to play the hero?" He met my eyes, guilt flickering behind his calm expression. "I owe you that much." I wanted to scream at him, to throw every hurt, every sleepless night, every lonely Christmas in his face. But instead, I just whispered, "Then help me save my son." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Samuel's words echoing in my mind. Someone wants him to take the fall. Who? And why Ethan? I didn't have answers, only a deepening sense of dread that whatever was coming, it wasn't over yet. Sleep never came that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames reflected in Ethan's frightened eyes, flames he swore he hadn't started. By morning, I was pacing the kitchen, my coffee untouched, my mind turning over Samuel's words. Someone wants him to take the fall. But who? Ethan didn't have enemies. He wasn't political. He barely even left the apartment except for work at the print shop. Whoever had orchestrated this had chosen him precisely because he was ordinary. Invisible. The perfect scapegoat. At 9 a.m., I went to see Melissa, his lawyer. She looked exhausted, her brown hair tied up, dark circles under her eyes. "Any luck?" I asked. She sighed. "The footage the prosecution has is terrible quality, but the outline, the jacket, it's identical to Ethan's. And the fingerprints," I interrupted her. "Could they have been planted?" She hesitated. "It's possible, but we'd need proof. Right now, the DA is confident. The trial moves fast next week." My heart sank. "There must be something we can do." She hesitated again, then lowered her voice. "I looked up the property owner of that construction site. The permit was approved through a shell company. Guess who's backing it?" "Who?" "Vincent Kane." The name hit me like a slap. Vincent Kane, a powerful developer with a spotless public image and a reputation for ruining anyone who stood in his way. He funded half the city's political campaigns, including... My breath caught. "Including Judge Harlow's?" Melissa nodded slowly. "That's what the records show." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. If Vincent Kane had ties to Samuel, and Samuel was overseeing Ethan's case, then my son was trapped in a web spun by the very man who once promised to protect me. That evening, I went to Samuel's office. The courthouse was nearly empty, the janitors sweeping the halls, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. He looked up when I entered. "Anna, this isn't a good..." I slammed a file on his desk. "You're working for Vincent Kane?" He froze. "Where did you answer me?" It's not what you think. Oh, really? I snapped. Because from where I stand, my son is about to lose his life while you sit there pretending you don't know who's pulling your strings. He stood slowly, tension rising in his shoulders. You think I'd let that happen to my own son? I stopped breathing. The words hung in the air, my own son. He hadn't said it before. Not once. Then prove it, I whispered. Prove you care. He exhaled shakily, running a hand over his face. Vincent Kane is behind this, yes. He's laundering money through that construction project. Someone burned the site down to expose him, but Kane's people swapped the footage, pinned it on Ethan. Why Ethan? I demanded. Because he works for a small print shop that accidentally processed invoices tied to Kane's dummy accounts. They think he saw something. I stared at him. And did he? Samuel's silence was answer enough. He turned to his computer, typing rapidly. I can't interfere in the case directly, but there are files, records Kane's people buried. If we can get them, we might clear Ethan. He hesitated before speaking again. They're on a private server. Kane keeps physical backups in his downtown office. It's heavily guarded, but. He looked at me with the same wild determination I remembered from decades ago. You were always better at sneaking into places than I was. I almost laughed, despite everything. You're asking me to break into his office? I'm asking you to save our son. That night, the city pulsed under a silver sky. I parked near Kane's office building, a cold tower of glass and steel that reflected nothing but darkness. The guard at the entrance looked half asleep. I wore black jeans, a hooded coat, and gloves. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echo in my ears. Through a side alley, I found a maintenance door Samuel said might be unlocked. It wasn't. But fear makes you resourceful. A quick jab with my old hairpin, and it clicked open. The elevator was shut down after hours, so I took the stairs, one silent step at a time, to the 6th floor. My palms were slick with sweat, my breath shallow. When I reached Kane's office, I could see the glow of security lights beneath the door. The lock was digital. I hesitated, then remembered something Samuel had said, code 1979. The year I met you. I entered it. The door beeped and unlocked. Inside, the room was immaculate: marble desk, leather chairs, a wall of photos showing Kane shaking hands with judges, mayors, and businessmen. Samuel was in one of them. My stomach turned. I found the cabinet in the corner, locked with a physical key this time. I used a letter opener to pry it open. Inside were several hard drives and folders marked with coded labels. I grabbed everything I could fit into my bag. Just as I was closing the drawer, I heard footsteps. I froze. The office door creaked open. A flashlight beam swept across the room. Who's there? A voice barked, deep, angry. I ducked behind the desk, holding my breath. The footsteps came closer. My fingers brushed against a glass paperweight on the floor. When the light turned away for a moment, I threw it across the room. It shattered against the opposite wall. The guard turned toward the noise, giving me the split second I needed. I bolted. Hey, he shouted. I sprinted through the hallway, my lungs burning, the alarm blaring behind me. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook as I shoved the bag onto the passenger seat and peeled away. At dawn, I met Samuel again, this time in a parking garage beneath an abandoned library. When I handed him the bag, he opened one of the drives immediately, connecting it to his laptop. Lines of encrypted data filled the screen. This is it, he murmured. Invoices. Offshore accounts. Kane's payments to campaign funds, judges, even police. Can we use it? I asked. Not yet. We need to decode it first, and we can't let anyone know we have it. If Kane finds out, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I looked at him, searching his face. Why are you helping me, Samuel? Really? He didn't look up. Because I should have been there from the beginning. For both of you. There was a long silence between us. For the first time, I saw something raw in his expression: regret, maybe love, maybe both. Ethan doesn't know, I said quietly. I figured. He shouldn't. Not yet. But deep down, I knew secrets had a way of surfacing. And when they did, they destroyed everything in their path. The next morning, I visited Ethan in the detention center again. He looked pale, tired. "Mom, are you okay?" "You look." "I'm fine," I lied. "We're working on something. Your lawyer's doing her best." He smiled weakly. "She's kind. I like her." For a moment, his voice softened, like the scared little boy he used to be. I reached through the bars and touched his hand. "Hold on a little longer, okay? I promise this will be over soon." He looked at me curiously. "You always say that like you know something I don't." I forced a smile. Mothers usually do. That night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Anna, or you'll lose more than your son." My blood ran cold. I called Samuel immediately. "Someone knows." "I'll handle it," he said. But there was fear in his voice. The next day, I learned the guard from Kane's building had been found unconscious in the parking lot. No robbery, no witnesses. Just a warning. Samuel went silent for 2 days after that. When he finally called, his voice was tense. "I've decoded part of the files. There's proof, bribes, false contracts, and payments to frame witnesses. But Anna," he paused. "Your name is in one of the documents." My stomach dropped. "What?" He hesitated. "A transaction. From 24 years ago. Kane's firm made a payment to a private investigator. To find you." I felt the world tilt beneath me. Why would he? And then it clicked. That night, the night I left Samuel all those years ago, someone had followed me. My apartment had been broken into a week later. I thought it was random. But what if it wasn't? "Samuel," I whispered. "What if this started long before Ethan?" He was silent for a long time before answering. "Then we're in deeper trouble than I thought." That night, I sat alone, staring at the photo I kept in my purse, me holding baby Ethan, smiling despite the exhaustion. I'd spent my life keeping him safe, away from the truth, away from his father. But now the past was clawing its way back, and it wouldn't rest until it swallowed us both. And I knew, with terrifying clarity, that this wasn't just about Ethan's innocence anymore. It was about why they had wanted to find me, and what they had buried all those years ago. The following morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. My eyes felt heavy, my body sore from the sleepless night before. When I finally answered, Melissa's voice came through, trembling. "Mrs. Carter, don't go outside. Please stay inside your apartment." My heart lurched. What's happening? There was a break-in at my office last night. The files related to Ethan's case were stolen. Everything, our evidence, notes, even his alibi statement. I sat up straight, my throat dry. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, but," she hesitated, "this isn't random. Whoever did it wanted one thing: Ethan's defense file." The flash drive Samuel and I had taken suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my coat pocket. Someone knew we had it. Someone who would stop at nothing to bury the truth. By noon, the news had spread. Judge Harlow was recusing himself from the case. The announcement hit me like a punch. I rushed to the courthouse and found him in his chambers, packing his things. He looked up as I entered, the lines on his face deeper, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You're stepping down?" I demanded. "I have to," he said quietly. "Lang's people found out about our meeting. They threatened to leak information about my past campaign contributions. If I stay on this case, Ethan won't get a fair trial." I clenched my fists. "You can't just walk away." He closed the folder on his desk and looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't walking away. It's making sure I can help you without every move being watched." My anger cracked under the weight of his calm. "And how exactly will you help me now?" He reached into his drawer and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, "This is the contact information of someone who used to work for Lang's company, a whistleblower. She disappeared 2 years ago, but if you find her, she can confirm everything on that drive." I hesitated. "And if I don't?" He looked down. "Then Ethan's fate is sealed." That night, I sat in my car outside a rundown motel on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered weakly, buzzing like a dying insect. According to the letter, the woman's name was Rebecca Miles. Former accountant at VL Holdings. Fired for misconduct, but the timing aligned with the first reports of illegal construction payments. I knocked twice on the door of room 12. After a few seconds, it opened a crack. A woman peered out, thin, hollow-eyed, her hair tied in a messy bun. "Who are you?" she asked sharply. "My name is Anna Carter," I said quickly. "Samuel Harlow sent me. It's about Victor Lang." The door stayed half open for a long, tense moment before she finally stepped aside. Her room was dim and cluttered, smelling faintly of coffee and cigarette smoke. "I told Harlow I'd never get involved again," she muttered, lighting a cigarette. "Lang's men watch everything." "Please," I said, my voice breaking. "My son's life depends on this. His being framed." She studied me for a long time, then sighed. "Sit down." I did. She opened a small box and took out several USB drives. "Lang's been laundering money through fake land development projects. When I discovered it, he made sure I lost everything, my job, my reputation, my family. But I kept backups. One of them should match the data you have." I handed her the flash drive Samuel had retrieved. She connected it to her laptop, typing furiously. Her eyes scanned the screen, widening. "Here," she said. "This is it, the transaction that proves Lang paid someone to start that fire. Look, he transferred funds to a contractor named R. Green, 24 hours before the incident." "Who's Green?" I asked. "Former security consultant. He specializes in controlled demolitions and arson cover-ups. If Lang paid him, that fire wasn't random, it was a setup." I leaned closer. "Can we prove it?" Rebecca hesitated. "Only if we can find Green, and that won't be easy. He vanished after the job." Before I could respond, there was a sudden crash outside the window. The glass shattered, a bullet whizzing past us and embedding into the wall. "Down!" she screamed. We dove to the floor as another shot rang out. My heart thundered in my chest. Whoever it was, they had found us. Rebecca crawled toward the door. "We need to go, now." We escaped through the back exit, sprinting through the rain toward my car. As I started the engine, Rebecca handed me another drive. "Take this. Everything you need to expose him is here. Don't trust anyone, not even Harlow." I turned to her in shock. "What do you mean?" She looked at me with haunted eyes. "You think he's clean? Lang owns everyone, Anna. Harlow's name appears in those records too." Before I could say a word, she shoved the drive into my hand and bolted into the darkness. I drove for miles without stopping, her words echoing in my head. Not even Harlow. It couldn't be true. Samuel had risked everything to help me. He saved me from Lang's men, stood by me when no one else would. But if he really was involved... When I finally reached home, I locked the door and opened the drive on my laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing folders labeled VL Holdings, Transactions Campaign Contributions Case Files. Sealed. I clicked the last one. My breath caught when I saw a familiar name. Judge Samuel Harlow, payment record, 2003. A deposit of $25,000. The date was just 3 months before he had broken things off with me. The room spun. All this time, I had believed he'd left because of fear, because of us. But maybe it had been something far darker. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or your son won't make it to trial." I dropped the phone, my hands shaking. Tears burned my eyes, not from fear but fury. They thought they could threaten me into silence. But they didn't know me. For 24 years, I'd survived alone, built a life from ashes, protected my boy from a world that never cared about women like me. Now, I wasn't going to hide. If Samuel was guilty, if Lang had bought justice itself, I would burn their entire empire to the ground. Even if it meant exposing the truth that could destroy us all. The next morning, the city seemed louder, not in the way it used to be, full of life and possibility, but like a beehive cracked open. Every honk, every shout, felt like a signal flaring in the darkness. I slept fitfully and woke with the taste of metal in my mouth. Rebecca's warning tangled with the anonymous text and the image of the bullet hole in her motel wall. Trust no one. Not even Harlow. I poured coffee I didn't taste and sat down at my kitchen table. The drives Rebecca had given me were arranged like relics, the one Samuel had handed me, and the other Rebecca pressed into my hand as we ran through the rain. I'd spent the night tracing their files, cross-referencing the transactions, watching names repeat like a bad prayer. Lang's network was a web, and in the center sat executives, politicians, lawyers, voices that could bend law and life to match their needs. Samuel's name blinked in the ledger like a saw. It was impossible to know how much of it was coerced, how much bought. People hide in shades of gray. Love had been gray once, and so was loyalty. I knew from experience that truth sometimes hurt because it revealed the shape of the compromise you'd made to survive. There was no time to wallow. Ethan's trial loomed like a black monolith. I drove to Melissa's office and rapped on the steel door. She answered, cheek still hollow from sleepless nights, a journalist's article clipped and taped to her board, arson suspect, family pleads innocent. The taped headline looked fragile, like something that could blow away in a draft. Mrs. Carter, Melissa breathed. We can use Rebecca's files. If we show a paper trail from Lang to Green, and Green to the contractors, we can at least create reasonable doubt. Green's missing, I reminded her. Rebecca said he vanished after the job. Melissa tapped at her laptop. We'll subpoena every contractor. We'll call in forensics on the lighter, demand cell phone records, passenger manifests, anything. We can drag them into the light. That afternoon my phone rang. Unknown number. I braced for another threat and answered on the first ring. Anna Carter. A woman's voice, sharp, almost clinical. Yes. You have something that belongs to Mr. Victor Lang. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Listen to me. The voice softened in a way that made my skin prickle. Bring it to the old municipal archive at noon tomorrow. Alone. No police. No Samuel. No Melissa. Come alone, or your son will be convicted and the trouble will escalate. They sounded confident, too confident. If they'd wanted the drives, they'd demand them at my door. This was a message. We know where you are. We are the ones setting the terms. I stopped answering. I told Melissa about the call. She frowned, then frowned deeper. That's a setup, she said bluntly. They want you isolated. If you go alone, they could plant evidence, destroy the drive, kill the whistleblower's trail. You must not go. I wanted to tell her she was right. I wanted to let fear dictate my next move. But the truth was simpler and meaner. The people holding power knew how to make threats sound like truth, and they knew enough of my history to make me obey. If I refused to go, they would hurt Ethan. If I went, maybe I'd hand them the thing that could free him. There was no safe answer, only trade-offs. I chose a third way. I would go, but not alone. I would create a trap they couldn't see. That night I called Samuel. Don't, Melissa had whispered when I told her my plan. If he's involved, I said, then I need to see it. I need to know where his loyalties lie. If he shows up to protect me, maybe he's still on our side. If he doesn't, she didn't finish me. The truth had teeth, and neither of us wanted to show it to the other. Samuel met me in an alley behind the municipal archive, grey sky pressing low, the streetlight painting gold on puddles. I had told him nothing, only arranged to see him. He arrived wearing an old coat, his face drawn, hands bare. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice low. I shouldn't either, I answered. But they want the drives. I'm baiting them. He looked at me a long time. They told you to bring them. Alone. They insisted. I met his eyes. I'm not going in alone. He swallowed. For a moment I thought he would turn away. Instead he nodded. We'll do it cleanly. No tricks. We entered the archive through a side door Samuel had unlocked with keys that smelled faintly of dust and oil. The building smelled old, like books and history, and in its quiet I felt smaller and more exposed than ever. We set the drives on the metal table in front of the old microfilm machine. Hide them, I whispered. Samuel slid them into an envelope and tucked it in the binding of an atlas that lay open. He pocketed the spine and handed me a small recorder, in case, he said. The sound of his fingers brushed mine. It felt like an apology wrapped in paper. We waited in the dim stacks. Minutes passed like years. Then a shadow moved at the doorway. 3 men entered. They didn't look like the suit-wearing hirelings who'd chased me through the rain. These men wore jackets heavy with the smell of the docks, tough, permanent. Their leader was a large man with a square jaw and a voice like gravel. "Mrs. Carter," he said, and that name in his mouth felt like an accusation. "We were hoping you'd be cooperative." Samuel stepped out then, hands visible. "You're not taking anything." The leader laughed. "Judge Harlow. I thought I smelled rotten virtue." He stepped closer to Samuel, eyes cold. "We need the drives. You remove them from our client's files. That makes this personal." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Samuel said, but the line in his face tightened. He didn't reach for anything. He never did. I saw movement at the far side of the stacks, soft as a cat. A woman stepped into the light, Rebecca. She had changed. Her hair was shorter, her eyes edged with resolve. She nodded once. "They won't take it from you," Rebecca said, voice small but steady. "Not while I can still." She reached into her pocket. One of the men moved like a flash and struck at her hand. Rebecca instinctively wrapped her arm around the small object and shoved it into her mouth. She began to choke. "No," I lunged. Samuel was already across the table, pushing, grabbing, and for a gasp-filled, breathless second there was a raw, animal struggle. The leader drew a small pistol and aimed it with the calm of a man used to deciding who lived. "Stop," he said, and the command folded through the room like a sheet. Samuel froze. "So did I." Rebecca coughed and spat blood into her palms. The leader stepped up to me. "Give us the drives, Anna. Or you'll watch your son be buried for a crime he didn't commit." I looked into his eyes and saw, for maybe the first time, the animal underneath the human. He believed in his own righteousness. He believed Lang was untouchable, that if he broke the rules he was simply surviving. Men like that convinced themselves that the world owed them things. I thought then of my son, his quiet, careful hands, the way he hummed when he worked, the way he had kissed my forehead when they took him away. I thought of the tenacity it had taken to hide him from the world when I was young and ashamed. I thought of the hollow letterboxes and nights on the floor. All that hide-and-seek had prepared me for this moment, the moment when the choice was not between right and wrong, but between survival and grace. Samuel's gaze flicked to Rebecca, then to me. "We can take him down," he said. "Expose Lang. Expose me, if it comes to that. But not like this." The leader barked a laugh. "Expose you? You're a judge. Who will believe a judge over a tycoon?" "You'd be surprised," Rebecca rasped, blood on her lip. She spat again and a small flash of silver clattered on the floor near her shoe, a tiny memory card. She'd managed to spit it out while choking. The leader's eyes snapped to the card. He lunged. Rebecca struggled, and in the jostle the card leapt and skittered beneath a shelf. No. One could reach it without moving the heavy stacks. "Get it," he snarled. "Now." Samuel lunged toward the shelf. The leader pushed a hand into his chest, hard enough to stagger him. Samuel's hand reeled, but he didn't fall. He didn't flinch. The leader's man struck Rebecca across the face. She gasped and collapsed to the floor. For a sliver of a second, while the room smelled of blood and old paper, I realized the truth with a cold, steady ache. This wasn't about justice for any of them. It was about power and the preservation of an economy that fed off secrecy. "Enough," I said, and my voice surprised me, stronger than I felt. "You can take the drives or you can take me. But you will not take my son." The leader sneered. "We'll take both, if you force our hand." Then something happened that no one expected. A siren wailed somewhere outside, the distant, thin cry of law enforcement. The leader's jaw tightened. In the momentary confusion, Samuel dropped his guard and reached for the card beneath the shelf. He emerged with it like someone reborn. "Run," he shouted. Rebecca scrambled up, eyes full of pain and furious determination. She handed Samuel one of her flash drives as she moved. I grabbed hers and we ran past the stunned men, through the stacks, out into the grey wash of the street. We didn't stop until the sirens were a memory and our breaths were ragged and ached. We clung to each other on the curb, shaking, the breaths between us a choir of relief and fear. "I didn't see you pull the card," I said to Samuel, voice raw. He looked at me and there was no judge there, no man of polished pronouncements, only someone who had stepped into the mess and risked being eaten alive by it. "Neither did I," he admitted. I think someone wanted us to find it. Someone wanted that to happen." Rebecca leaned back, head against a cold brick. "They'll come after us harder now," she whispered. "Once Lang knows his files are missing, he'll do anything." We sat in the rain and the quiet stretching between us was heavy. I felt equal parts vindicated and hollow. We had the card, the small, stubborn thing that might topple a titan. We had also realized how thoroughly the rot had grown. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up before dawn. My heart raced as I stared at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on my chest like a stone. The air in the small apartment felt thick, suffocating, as though the walls themselves held their breath for what was coming. I made tea but couldn't drink it. My hands trembled so violently that the cup rattled against the saucer. My lawyer, Mira, was supposed to pick me up at 8. By then, I had already been pacing for hours, whispering silent prayers. I wasn't praying for revenge anymore. I just wanted peace, for my son, for myself, for truth. When we arrived at the courthouse, the crowd outside was massive. Journalists, camera flashes, whispers. Everyone wanted to see the trial that had become the talk of the city, the woman who lied to the judge. They didn't know I was the same woman who had once sat quietly in the back rows of family court while my ex-husband destroyed my life with lies. Now, the tables had turned. As I stepped out of the car, the murmurs grew louder. Mira shielded me as best she could, whispering, "Don't look at them. Focus." But my eyes found him anyway. Judge Anand. He stood at the top of the courthouse steps, stiff, his jaw clenched. He tried to look composed, but I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes. The same look he gave me years ago when he handed over custody of my child to a man who should never have been near him. He looked at me like I was a ghost he thought he'd buried. And in a way, I was. Inside the courtroom, the tension was unbearable. Every breath felt amplified. Every second dragged on like a lifetime. The prosecutor, Mr. Shah, stood confidently, speaking in sharp, rehearsed sentences. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that my client, Mr. Arun, was attacked without provocation. The defendant, Mrs. Kavita Sharma, acted with malicious intent." He paused, then looked at me. "This isn't about justice. This is about vengeance." The words hit me like knives. Mira stood next, her voice calm but cutting. "Your Honor, my client did not act with vengeance. She acted in defense of herself, of her son, and of the truth. For years, she was silenced. For years, her cries went unheard. Today, we will make sure her voice is not buried again." A hush fell. Then, she turned to the witness box. "Please call Rohan Sharma to the stand. My son." He walked in, tall and trembling slightly, his hands clenched into fists. I hadn't seen him since the night of the incident. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and my heart broke all over again. He took the oath, then sat down. Mira began softly, "Rohan, can you tell the court what happened that night?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "My father, he was drunk. He came to our house. He said he wanted to talk. Mom told him to leave. He grabbed her, pushed her against the wall. I tried to stop him. His voice cracked. He hit me. I fell. Then he took out a knife." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Judge Anand shifted in his seat, clearly uneasy. Rohan continued, "Mom tried to stop him. She pushed him away. He fell on the knife himself. It was an accident." Tears blurred my vision. Mira asked softly, "Rohan, did your mother ever teach you to hate your father?" He shook his head. "No. She always said he was sick, but she hoped he'd get better." That broke something in me. The quiet dignity of my son, the child who had seen too much, endured too much, now defending me before the man who once took him away. The prosecutor tried to shake his confidence, throwing cruel questions, twisting his words, but Rohan didn't waver. When the testimonies ended, it was time for closing statements. Mira stood tall. Your Honor, what we've seen today is the power of truth, a truth buried under years of injustice. You know this woman, Judge. You know her story, even if you pretend you don't. Because you were there. You made the decision that destroyed her. And maybe that's why you're so afraid to face her now. Gasps echoed. The entire courtroom went still. Judge Anand's face turned pale. The prosecutor immediately objected, but Mira's words had already pierced through the silence. For a long time, the judge said nothing. He simply stared at me, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice shaking ever so slightly. This court will take a short recess. When he returned, the air had changed. His tone was different, lower, almost remorseful. He cleared his throat, then began, I have presided over hundreds of cases, but some never leave you. Years ago, I made a decision based on evidence presented before me. But I see now that truth is not always what is written on paper. He looked directly at me. I owe this woman, Mrs. Sharma, an apology that the law cannot express. My heart stopped. He continued, based on the testimonies, evidence, and witness statements, this court finds the defendant, Mrs. Kavita Sharma, not guilty. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. It took a moment for the words to sink in. Then I heard Mira whisper, you're free. My knees gave way, and I clutched the table, tears flooding down my face. The courtroom erupted, some cheering, some in shock. Rohan ran to me, holding me so tightly that I could barely breathe. I told you, Mom, he whispered. Truth wins. I held him close, burying my face in his shoulder. Yes, my son. It finally did. As we left the courthouse, the press swarmed around, flashing cameras, shouting questions. Mrs. Sharma, how does it feel to be free? Do you forgive the judge? What will you do next? I smiled faintly and said, I'm going home. But as I walked down those courthouse steps, I turned back one last time. Judge Anand stood by the window above, watching silently. Our eyes met, no anger, no hatred, just the quiet acknowledgement of two lives forever changed by choices, truth, and regret. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. That night, I lit a candle by the window. Rohan sat beside me, sketching quietly like he used to as a child. Mom, he said softly. Yes. Are you going to tell people your story now? I looked out the window, at the faint glow of streetlights. Yes, I whispered. Not for revenge, but for those who think they're alone. He smiled. You should start a YouTube channel. People need to hear it from you. I laughed gently. Maybe I will. So here I am, telling my story, not from bitterness, but from truth. Because somewhere out there, another mother is sitting in silence, thinking no one will ever believe her. And to her, I say, speak. Because one day, even the judge who once turned away, will have to listen. And I had realized something else, a slower, more personal ache. Samuel hadn't been a stranger in my life. He had been a man who had chosen safety over love, and now he had chosen otherwise. That didn't erase the past. It complicated it. It placed a dangerous, fragile hope in the palm of my hand. As we planned our next move, how to secure the data, whom to contact, how to shelter Ethan from a system that had been bought and sold, I felt the same hard, fierce current that had carried me through every solo night of parenthood. The fight was no longer abstract. It was here. It smelled of wet pavement and warm blood, and I didn't plan to step away. We had the truth in our hands. The question was who would survive long enough to tell it.